Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about Ethereum and the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio, but we're going to be looking at it through the lens of the price of Bitcoin, what Bitcoin was doing at the time to try to fully understand various phases of the market cycle and how Ethereum could respond if the last market cycle would be any indication. So if you guys like the content, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, we've talked a lot about Ether Bitcoin, and historically, we mainly just put on the Ether Bitcoin valuation. I don't tend to overlay the price of Bitcoin, but I said, why not? I don't actually have it labeled because I forgot, but this is the price of Bitcoin on the secondary y-axis. So if we break this down, you can see that this is Ether Bitcoin on a logarithmic scale, so the Ether valuation against Bitcoin. And then on the secondary y-axis, we have the price of Bitcoin on a logarithmic scale. So the white line corresponds to the primary y-axis, and the yellow line corresponds to the secondary y-axis. So make sure you fully understand that before we really dive into this, because this makes a huge difference. If you're looking at the yellow line and thinking it corresponds to this axis, then you're not going to be able to fully understand what I'm trying to say probably. So we also have to put on the 20-week, of course, right? I mean, this is our bull market support for Bitcoin. Let's put it on there, and let's jump in. So what we want to do is we want to go through a lot of the major Ether pumps against Bitcoin and a lot of the major Ether retracements against Bitcoin, and fully understand what was Bitcoin doing at the time, because there could be some surprises throughout, which could lead us to new information or more information that we may not otherwise have seen before. So the first one is this green line. So this green line was the first major breakout of Ether against Bitcoin. What happened at that time? What happened? Well, if we look to see what preceded it, we can see that the yellow line, which is the price of Bitcoin, had a nice run above the 20-week moving average. And then it sort of peaked and then calmed down for a while. And during this calming down phase, that's when Ether pumped against Bitcoin. This is why I've often said, even if Bitcoin has a slow bleed over a lot of weeks, Ether can still move against Bitcoin. It doesn't preclude it. It's just that as long as Bitcoin volatility remains high and it's continuing to go, to sway by several $1,000s a week, going down to 16K and back up to 19.9 or 19.5, then going back down to 17 or something, and then back up to 19.4. This does not lend anything to Ethereum in terms of the ability for Ethereum to do anything, because Bitcoin volatility remains high. So this was the first major move. It came after Bitcoin made that first move above the 20-week moving average. And we said, this market cycle, the returns would likely be diminished. Okay, so we know that the returns will likely be diminished. So then what's the next one? So this is the next one. This was a key one because it was a long-term downtrend. So, I mean, obviously there's this first one. And at this point, if we had drawn a line, you would see that it would have corresponded to Bitcoin hugging the 20-week moving average for a couple months or so. And during that time, the Ether Bitcoin valuation came down, but then it sort of rebounded back up. And then it entered into a fairly long downtrend, basically going for over half a year against Bitcoin. Well, what was Bitcoin doing during that time to merit such a move? Well, at the time, Bitcoin, if you look, Bitcoin broke out. It tested the 20-week and then broke out. That sounds familiar, right? Bitcoin over here, testing the 20-week, and it breaks out. And during that breakout, Ether Bitcoin bleeds. Okay, similar thing. Test the 20-week, Bitcoin breaks out, Ether Bitcoin bleeds in that scenario. And then, this is in 2016. However, we must also note that there are some differences, right? Because this over here, the price of Bitcoin was still well below the prior all-time high. I mean, this price point right here, if you go over, we were still not at the point where we were even testing the prior all-time high. So during that time, Ether bled against Bitcoin. However, also note it was coming off an 1,800% move against Bitcoin. So it's not like it's exactly, it's apples and oranges to some degree. It's not like we're experiencing a drop right after an 1,800% move or anything like that. So there would have been a lot of sell pressure on Ethereum at the time. And it bled for a pretty substantial amount of time. And you can see that this move here, the further decrease in the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, came again when Bitcoin was hugging the 20-week, and then as Bitcoin left the 20-week and rallied on up. We know that when Bitcoin rallies on up, we know that market sentiment can change on a dime. When Bitcoin holds the 20-week moving average as support, Bitcoin rallied on up, Ethereum bled against Bitcoin. Okay, Bitcoin came back down. During that time, we know that Ethereum came back up against Bitcoin. And then ultimately, this major move came around the time that Bitcoin got to its all-time high, right? So this was basically when it broke through the all-time high. Over the next several months, we saw a fairly significant rally of Ethereum against Bitcoin. Okay, and we're essentially flirting with the prior all-time high now. Will we break past it and in a convincing manner? It's too early to say yet. Will Ether bleed against Bitcoin until it does? I don't think that's necessarily the case. If Bitcoin can establish itself into a lower volatility channel or something, then I think there's a good chance that Ether could break out against Bitcoin. But we must note that when Bitcoin is testing the 20-week moving average and then breaking out from it and going and then just like skyrocketing upward, that is a time we know that Ether will tend to bleed against Bitcoin. It tends to bleed against Bitcoin during that time. But when you get to above the prior all-time high, market sentiment can change, right? Market conditions change. I like to say, like when Bitcoin's below its prior all-time high, it's not even in price discovery mode yet because it's just breaking down the barriers that it has kind of laid out for itself a few years ago. But I think there will come a day when Bitcoin breaks above 20K and the market sentiment will change and things can change quickly and some of the rules that we might operate on could change quickly because it'll just bring a lot of new eyes into the space. Headlines like crazy if it can break past 20K in a sustainable manner, and I think it'll be really good for the space. But let's continue on. What happened here? Why did Ether drop back down against Bitcoin at that point? Well, Bitcoin tested the 20-week, right? We know that if Bitcoin drops down to the 20, Ether will bleed against Bitcoin, and that's exactly what we saw. It was in the middle of this move. And you might look at this move and say, well, this was one major move. These took months, right? If you look at these are years. This move is from 2017 to 2018, or this window here. So it might look like this is just happening in a few days or weeks if you're used to looking at short time frames. These are monthly moves. So this downtrend here, it's not like this was just one day or anything like that. But then ultimately, Ether continued the rally on up, and you can see at the top here, I didn't draw that one, but at the top, it started to bleed back down, and it corresponded with Bitcoin coming back down to the 20-week moving average. Go figure. And then what happened here? This major move, Ether broke out against Bitcoin again in late 2017. And it corresponded to basically Bitcoin getting to the end of its own run. So Bitcoin's run was exhausted. People took profits from Bitcoin, put them into other speculative assets, watched them go up for a couple weeks, and then the party was over. Okay, but then what happened after that? Because after the peak, there's some interesting things as well. So actually, I guess this one was out of order. So you can see this red one here at the peak. Why did it go down? Well, that was where Bitcoin turned around, tested the 20-week. When that happens, generally not good for Ethereum. So let's continue on. What happened here? Ethereum started bleeding against Bitcoin. Well, this was when Bitcoin came back down to the 20-week and broke below it. So we know that if it breaks below it, it's a pretty bad indicator in terms of expecting a lot of upward price movement in the short term. And you can see that since that point, for the next 2 years, Ether just bled against Bitcoin, right? Since that point where we broke through the 20-week, we ultimately just held it as resistance time and time again. There was one time here where we rallied back up, but it was short-lived because Bitcoin held resistance right here at the 20-week moving average. Thus, Ethereum lost all the confidence it had, and it bled back down pretty badly over the next couple years. Okay, and you can see here again, it had like a nosedive off this cliff. After it came back up to the 20-week, it poked its head up above it for a little bit, but ultimately we just came straight back down and continued to get rejected by it for the next several months. During that time, Ether bled against Bitcoin. And you know, it was essentially the bad news bears, right? The bad news bears came to town, and they were taking names at that point. So then what happened here? Well, there's other times where buying Ethereum can be very good, right? It's not just about the 20-week. You know, when Bitcoin bottoms, historically, when Bitcoin bottoms, altcoins are just completely destroyed, and Ethereum too. I don't really consider Ethereum an altcoin, but Ethereum gets completely destroyed when Bitcoin bottoms, and if you can buy Ethereum at the bottom for Bitcoin, which would also be likely the bottom for Ethereum, you can actually see a pretty big bounce back for Ethereum against Bitcoin, because when people get very fearful over Bitcoin, everything else in the market, for the most part, I'm sure there's some pet projects you guys have that you'll argue otherwise, but for the most part, most other coins will bleed against Bitcoin, or will gain, will bleed against Bitcoin when Bitcoin's capitulating, having that capitulation candle, and then they'll have like a resurgence once it's proved that, okay, that was the local bottom. So then here again, what happened, right? Why did we keep bleeding? Well, this is a situation where Bitcoin mostly just goes up and doesn't have any significant retest at the 20-week moving average. It doesn't have any long, extended sideways movement. If it doesn't have any of this, then we're likely not going to see Ethereum break out against Bitcoin, just because the show's on Bitcoin, right? All eyes are on Bitcoin if Bitcoin's not letting anyone take over. And that essentially means that it just continues to rally, and has no consequential test of the 20-week moving average, no sideways movement. And so this is why we continue to see Ethereum bleed down against Bitcoin. Now we're going to skip through here because it's just a lot of bear market accumulation phase nonsense, right? Just up and down, up and down. And we're going to go back over here. What happened here? Why did Ethereum Bitcoin rally here? Well, Bitcoin had a surge above the 20-week moving average, which is the yellow line, and it came back down close to it, and confirmed it as some level of support. And then Ethereum surged, right? Ethereum surged after this major move by Bitcoin. So in a similar manner, we had a major move by Bitcoin over here, above the 20-week moving average, okay? And then back down, and as it was going back down, we saw Ethereum breakout, right, against Bitcoin. Once Bitcoin got to the 20-week and was holding it as support, that was a time where Ethereum started to bleed. Okay, so at the exact time that Bitcoin is like hugging the 20-week moving average for weeks at a time, it tends to not be the best time to hold or to be purchasing a lot of Ethereum. I'll still always hold some Ether unless we're just like, if we go to 10K or something, or the risk level on Ether gets to the higher risk band, then yeah, at that point, I would probably call it a day. But, this is why I've said before, a slow bleed is fine as long as it is over weeks and weeks and weeks, and not something that, we go from, 19K to 16K in one night. That's not good. That's not a slow bleed, right? That's a ton of bears coming out, a ton of little panda bears coming out and taking over the show. So we look here and we say, well, what happened here? Ethereum rallied against Bitcoin and then it started to go down again. Well, we know why. Bitcoin went back to the 20-week, right? Bitcoin goes back to the 20, Ethereum likely bleeds against Bitcoin. And now you might be looking at this and thinking, like, this white line, it looks like it's holding resistance against the blue one. No, remember, the white line corresponds to the primary y-axis, the yellow line to the secondary, and the 20-week moving average is of Bitcoin, which corresponds to the secondary y-axis. So it might look like it's coming up here and doing something, but this interaction is completely nonsensical because it's on two separate graphs. So we look at this and say, well, what has happened? Bitcoin has rallied off the 20-week up pretty significantly, and now maybe, just maybe, it's starting to cool down. Okay? We know when it starts to cool down, like here in 2016, had a nice rally above the 20, started to cool down. That's when Ethereum made a move, right? That's when it did it. Here again, Bitcoin had a really nice rally throughout these months here. Started to cool down a little bit, tested the 20-week, but during this cool down phase, which lasted several weeks, Ethereum was rallying against Bitcoin. So I say this because we've talked a lot about an impending Ether move against Bitcoin that historically speaking tends to happen in Q1. Out of the 5 years we have for Ethereum, 3 of them have had really nice Q1 moves against Bitcoin. 2 of them, the moves started in mid-December. So this is why I say I think it's a fool's errand to try to necessarily time it. First of all, we're not sure if it's going to happen. Again, this is not financial advice. We're just using historical trends to try to elucidate stuff in the market that we might not otherwise be aware of. But we don't know if it's going to happen. But we can see that, in terms of what needs to happen before it can happen, seems like everything's there, right? It seems like everything's there. The thing that might preclude it from happening is if Bitcoin just has a nasty correction in the next week or two back to the 20-week moving average. It doesn't mean it won't happen, right? It doesn't mean that it can't. Q1's a long period of time. It's 3 months. So there's still a lot of ground to go, even if that were to happen. But if it doesn't happen and Bitcoin can maintain this bullish level, whether it goes sideways, has a slow bleed over the next month or two, I think there's a good chance that we'll see a breakout of Ethereum against Bitcoin. But again, it hinges on Bitcoin not just capitulating down to the 20-week and especially not going below the 20-week, because when we know that if we go below the 20-week like we do over here, then it really is the bad news bears. Right? It really is the bad news bears for the foreseeable future until we can prove that until Bitcoin can have another decisive move above the 20-week, cool off again, and then Ethereum can maybe take the show again. Right now, Bitcoin has had a major rally from 10K to 20K, essentially almost 20K, 19K or so in about 2 months. If it starts to cool off a little bit, then this could be the beginning of a nice move of Ether against Bitcoin. This is what we want to see. We know what we need to see. We need Bitcoin to cool down. And if it does, then I think Ethereum will be back in business and things can get heated really quickly. So hopefully you guys enjoy the content. I know we kind of went systematically through each one, through a lot of these moves, but I think that by fully digesting what happened during prior market cycles, we can leverage that information to our advantage. And so, if there comes a time, we don't know what's going to happen, but I often say it doesn't really matter what happens, it matters how you react to it. If Ethereum does break out against Bitcoin, and we have a major breakout like this, probably not this substantial, right? Because we would expect diminishing returns. But if it does have a major breakout against Bitcoin, which is in fact what we're hoping for, right? And this is what we're hoping, then in that scenario, we also need to remember that at some point, Bitcoin will test the 20-week. And if it does, during that test of the 20-week, we know that the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio will go back down. And this is why I say, never let a good bubble go to waste. In my opinion, it's good to dynamically DCA sell. You could sell back to USD, you could sell back to Bitcoin. If you're more in it for the long haul and you don't want to bother with short-term moves, then just simply maybe you just stop buying Ether if it's up 100 or 200% in a few months, right? You just stop buying it for a little while. You still have your stack, but you don't necessarily want to be going in once it's up like several 100% or something. So just something to consider. If you guys like this content, remember to check out my premium list. You can find a link to the sale in the description below. I'll keep it going on a little bit longer. I keep saying I'm going to end it soon, but there continues to be a lot of interest in people joining it. So I want to give people a little bit more time to sign up because I do know that having the lower price point for a while does allow people to sign up that might not otherwise be able to. So make sure you sign up if you guys want access to it. It's a pretty large community at this point. We have a Telegram chat room as well, a Telegram alerts channel, a risk dashboard, trading view indicators, premium weekly videos, premium reports, a dynamic DCA selling dashboard. And next year in 2021, we're going to have some live streams just for the premium list. So a whole lot of value there, in my opinion. Of course, it's the work I put out. So make sure you check it out. Link in the description below. There's also a lifetime option for those who just want to pay once, be done with it, and just kind of have access to the channel, to the premium content for the duration of the market cycle. So with that said, remember at the very least to subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate, you know, getting to 70,000 subscribers and on to 80,000, right? On to 80,000 subscribers. Just keep it moving on up. So make sure you subscribe. Turn on alerts if you want to get notified of future videos. We have a Telegram channel of over 10,000 people, a public one that you can check out. The link to that in the description below as well. And also give the video a thumbs up if you guys enjoyed the content. So that'll wrap it up for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this deep dive into the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation with the price of Bitcoin and the 20-week moving average of Bitcoin overlaid. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.